Good evening. Welcome to the USS Constitution Museum Salute to Service virtual event. I'm Paul George, chair of the museum's board. Tonight we are gathered to honor General Joseph Dunford, United States Marine Corps, the 19th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the 36th Commandant of the Marine Corps. As chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he was the principal advisor to the President, Secretary of Defense, and the National Security Council. General Dunford will receive the Charles Francis Adams Award, the museum's highest honor, and he will share with us his own reflections on service and leadership. Let me first of all, though, thank all of our sponsors this evening, in particular Liberty Mutual, who has been a long-standing sponsor of the museum and returns as our presenting sponsor this year. Over the years, Liberty Mutual has been a steadfast supporter of the museum, permitting thousands of children to attend the museum in person and virtually, particularly in these challenging times. Let me thank all of our other sponsors as well. They put wind in our sails as we've worked our way through a very, very complicated pandemic year. Tonight is about service and leadership. First, I will ask Museum President and CEO Anne Grimes-Rand to talk about how the museum has demonstrated leadership, particularly through the pandemic. Secondly, I want to thank and recognize one of our long-standing sponsors, Dennis Langwell, a member of our board for several years and one who inspires us with all of his commitment. And thirdly, we'll hear from General Dunford. We'll hear about his candid reflections on service and leadership, and we'll present him with the Charles Francis Adams Award. Again, to all our sponsors, thank you for your support. And now, what better person to tell you about the museum than our president, Anne Grimes-Rand. Anne, welcome this evening.
Thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
And tell us how things have been going. I remember March 2020 vividly, when the museum closed, the staff went home, the pandemic was on. How did you forge through the year?
Well, that was a low moment, but we realized a challenge is an opportunity for creativity. So as we closed the door and locked the door and walked out, we said, we are creating a virtual museum, and our staff rose to the challenge, and we realized we could fulfill our mission online instead of within the museum. As you know, the museum's mission is to engage all ages in the stories of old Ironsides, to spark excitement about maritime heritage, naval service, and the American experience. And we can do that virtually through programs just as we're doing this evening. So we created an online version of our exhibit with funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Now, the award-winning All Hands on Deck exhibit is available online, so students and families anywhere in the nation can sign on and join Constitution's crew in 1812. In fact, we have kids in Tennessee who are Constitution crazy right now, so we've learned we can fulfill our mission even when our doors are closed.
And you've been at the museum a long time. You've seen a lot of ups and downs. Tell us, first of all, how you get along with the crew of Constitution, how you work with them, because they've been your partner over the many years you've been involved with the museum.
We have a terrific partnership with the crew of Constitution, and during the virtual COVID times, it got even better. The ship's crew would participate in our education programs live from the deck of Constitution, while our museum educators could show the artifacts and tell the stories. So our partnership gets stronger each day. In fact, just last month, on September 11th, I was so proud of the ship and all of our partners in the Navy Yard. It was the National Day of Service and Remembrance. So we started with a very moving ceremony in the Navy Yard to remember those who died on 9/11. Then Constitution got underway with Medal of Honor recipients on board. She flew an enormous flag with the stars of the Medal of Honor there. And what a way to honor our heroes and say thank you. Meanwhile, ashore back at the museum, we had volunteers who helped us to create 1,000 care packages for new recruits to the Navy. We partnered with Operation Gratitude, a wonderful group that helps volunteers take action to say thank you to those who serve. So visitors to the museum wrote over 1,000 thank you notes that day while Constitution was underway. That's the excitement of working together with our partners in the Navy Yard and saying thank you to those who serve and the families who support them.
And I know that working with the Navy has been a wonderful experience. You educate the crew, you have a lot to do with programs in the Navy Yard. But the Constitution sailors go around the country to talk about naval history. And they also, I think, let us know how much the Navy means, not only in terms of military preparedness, but humanitarian services. They do wonderful work all over the world in humanitarian needs. Tell us now, bring us back to Boston. Tell us now what you're doing in Boston these days.
Well, it's been so nice to have the museum open again 7 days a week since Memorial Day. So we've been able to welcome over 100,000 visitors this summer, which is more than we expected in the midst of a pandemic. But it's so nice to see people in the galleries again, to hear kids laughing, the excitement of being able to swing in a hammock or furl a sail. So that, to me, is incredibly rewarding. In fact, the readers of USA Today voted the museum one of the top 10 history museums in the country. They voted us number 5, which is a wonderful endorsement of the work that we do. But we work in partnership with the Navy and with the National Park Service to bring the stories to life. And we are so excited about the plans we have for the future. We are envisioning a new gateway to the Navy Yard, an improved visitor experience. So people who walk along the Freedom Trail will have an opportunity to learn a bit about Constitution. We envision a new museum along with a parks orientation. So visitors, before they set foot on the decks of Old Ironsides, they'll appreciate where she's been, what it was like to serve aboard. We're going to have new exhibits, new technology, dynamic new programs, changing exhibits. The idea of creating that world-class welcome that Old Ironsides deserves.
It'll be fun to see kids running through the new museum, but it's fun seeing them running through now. And I know you've been doing a lot with young children in Boston. Tell us some of the things that are going on.
Well, my favorite project through the pandemic has been our mini boats. They were built by 4th graders at the Boston Public School just across the street from us. And we were able to launch, these are 5-foot boats that we launch into the Gulf Stream, and they follow the trade winds, and they have a solar-powered GPS transmitter. So they're sending their location back to the kids in the classroom. And when you have to learn on a computer screen, what better thing than to be able to see the boat that you built out there at sea? So this is an adventure at sea for our Boston students. We launched them off of North Carolina. They've been tracking up the East Coast. And as they were turning to cross the Atlantic, Tropical Storm Elsa came through and blew them off course. So now our mini boats this summer were headed to Newfoundland, and in fact to a remote rocky shore in Newfoundland. Our first mini boat went aground. And what do we do now? Well, we reached out on social media, reached over 100,000 people who reached out to the people they knew. This was a remote rocky shore, no town nearby. The closest town has only 30 people, but word got to somebody in that town of McCallum. The next morning they were out in their boat, found that GPS tracker, found our mini boat, and rescued it. So both of our boats have run aground in Newfoundland. They've been rescued. Now they've gone to the nearest high school, and our educators just went to Newfoundland to work with the students there. The students have repaired the boats, and with the help of the Department of Fisheries in Canada, they're going to get back out into the Gulf Stream. But what I like best about it, this is maritime adventure live in the classrooms in Boston. These are international ambassadors. Now these students in Boston know something about Newfoundland and vice versa. This is STEM education at its best. This is hands-on, this is minds-on. These kids are learning about ocean currents, trade winds, about building ships, about buoyancy, about displacement, and about international relations. So that's what I love best about the mini boats. And they're going to be relaunched back at sea. You can follow them on our website.
I can sense your enthusiasm. Another chapter in Home from Away, that wonderful play about the people of Gander, Newfoundland during 9/11. Thank you ever so much for your thoughts about what's been going on at the museum. And now to present the Old Ironsides Exemplary Service Award to Dennis Langwell. A wonderful group of people supports the museum and helps us achieve impact. With the Old Ironside Exemplary Service Award, the museum recognizes leaders whose tireless work on behalf of the museum enables us to achieve our mission each and every day. This year's award goes to Dennis Langwell. Dennis has served the museum in so many outstanding ways. He's been on our board for 8 years. He's provided extensive outreach. And when needed, Dennis is an advocate for taking swift and decisive action. Dennis, please join me. Great to see you, Dennis.
Great to be here, Paul. Great to see you, Ann.
Hi, Dennis.
Dennis, it gives me great pleasure to give you this award. Congratulations.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ann. It means a lot. Once again, thank you, Paul and Ann and the Board of Trustees for this recognition. It really means a lot to me. The USS Constitution has a long history of projecting strength and preserving liberty. It's a story that needs to be told to our children, and it's an honor to be on the Board of Trustees with the mission of telling that story. The telling of the Constitution story starts with an awesome crew and officers of the ship who care for and preserve Old Ironsides while continuing to live her history. It also includes the museum and its dedicated team who craft and tell the story of Old Ironsides, along with the trustees who work to support the effort, and of course the benefactors who provide the resources to tell the story to hundreds of thousands of school children each year. I play a small role in all of this, but I've had the good fortune of knowing business associates, friends really, who share the goal of telling a story of freedom through strength and who generously provide the resources to do so. I'm extremely appreciative of their continued support. This award is an honor for me, but I also see it as a heartfelt tribute to our generous benefactors. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. All the best.
Thank you, Paul.
Now it's time for a highlight of our evening. Recently, General Dunford visited USS Constitution, and I had a chance to sit down with him in a very special location. We met in the captain's cabin, the very spot where Constitution's 76 captains have guided America's ship of state to victories around the world and back to safe harbor. The ship is an enduring demonstration of service and leadership, and I think you'll agree that General Dunford certainly embodies these ideals. Let's hear his thoughts. Welcome and greetings from the USS Constitution Museum. I'm Paul George, Chairman of the Museum's Board, and I'm aboard the USS Constitution, America's ship of state. In the captain's cabin with me is General Joseph Dunford, the 19th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the 36th Commandant of the Marine Corps. General, it's wonderful to have you here.
Hey, good morning, Paul. It's great to be here.
Thank you, General. I know you went to Boston College High School and you're a local guy. How is it to be back home?
You know, it's great, Paul, and not only am I local, but there's a lot of history in my family here. My dad was actually stationed at Marine Barracks Charlestown when he came back from the Korean War. Was recovering at what was then the Chelsea Naval Hospital from frostbite that he received at the Chosin Reservoir. I was here in 1982 to commission my brother on board the USS Constitution, and the museum was kind enough to host my retirement after 42 years of active duty in the fall of 2019. So being here on a sunny day in Boston aboard the USS Constitution couldn't be better.
But let's talk a little bit about your service. You mentioned your father in the Korean War. Tell us about his service.
So my dad grew up in South Boston, and he was too young for World War II, and he enlisted in the Marine Corps when he graduated from South Boston High School in 1948. He served 4 years in the Marine Corps, and in 1950, he was actually on Marine Barracks duty when the Korean War broke out, and immediately deployed to South Korea. He fought at the battles of the Naktung in August of 1950. He landed at Incheon in September of 1950 and then was at the Chosin Reservoir in November and December of 1950, where he turned 20 years old at the Chosin Reservoir.
Did that inspire you to join the Marines?
Very, very much so, Paul. You know, I had a number of uncles that served in World War II as well, and then my dad's service in the Marine Corps certainly was part of that inspiration.
Let's talk a little bit more about service in the larger context. What do you tell young people today about service?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's really something that the museum, I would hope, inspires young people to think about. The first thing I tell them is that to have strong communities, to have a strong state, to have a strong country requires an informed, engaged citizen. Literally, the health of our democracy depends on engaged citizens. I like to say that democracy is not a spectator sport. The second thing I would tell people is that there have been times in our history when our nation has been threatened, and we've had to fight for what we have today. And my own experience from traveling around the world is that what we have here in the United States of America is in fact worth fighting for, and I'd let them know that. And I guess the third thing I would say about public service is, aside from what I think is a responsibility for all of us to serve in some way, many forms of service, is that as I look back, the opportunity to be a part of something bigger than yourself is incredibly rewarding.
What do you think about the idea of national service for young people?
You
Whether it
know,
be military or otherwise.
Sure, Paul, it's a great debate that we ought to have. My preference would be that people volunteer, that we inspire and educate young people to step up and find a way to serve, to find a way to make a difference. That'd be my preference. And so, regardless of whether or not we eventually go to some type of mandatory service, I think the one thing we should do in our education system is emphasize, probably very strongly, the need for good citizens to be involved in some form of community public service.
I spent time in the Navy in my 20s, and I think of the three things I did in my 20s, college and graduate school, the Navy was the best experience of the three. I don't tell all my friends that because some went other ways, but I think it's a good way to go. Certainly, I think it benefits a lot of young people. That said, we have a lot of people in the military today who live and travel all the time. They're on the go. The Navy is away much of the time. What do we do about that 1% of people that are in the service today, not well known to their neighbors? How do we take better care of them?
Yeah, it's a great question, Paul. And I think the one word I would use to describe military family life is probably disruptive. And in our own case, Helen and I raised our three children. She would know the exact number. We moved more than 20 times. Our children went to many different schools. She was a physical therapist, and so had to get relicensed in multiple states over the years and find new jobs. And so, when I think about military life, the big impact really is on the families, and it has an impact on education, it has an impact on youth activities, has an impact on healthcare, employment. Virtually every aspect of a military family's life is affected by the lifestyle. And the one thing that I think communities can do is just to be aware. The majority of our young men and women that are in uniform actually don't live on base. They live in and amongst the community. And I think a little bit of awareness and maybe even something as simple as a smile and a welcome when they join a community, to something else where we may look for ways to facilitate children smoothly transitioning into school, spouses finding a place to be employed, churches welcoming people, youth activities, making an exception because the child didn't sign up on time before they moved. There's a lot of things that can be done, and most of them are not difficult, but they can have a huge impact on the quality of life of that military family.
You're involved in a program, aren't you, that helps families get acclimated in communities?
So Ellen and I have agreed to join Blue Star Families this year, where they have formed a welcome week in September, and this is the first one that they've done, and they're going to do it every year. And it's to raise awareness that there's some 600,000 veterans and military families moving every year. And they're moving to a community near you, and so we want people to know that. And then we found ways to identify those families that are moving into the community, and found ways for those who want to help those families to identify themselves. And so I think that will help institutionalize, if you will, the welcome of our military families.
Let's turn to leadership. You spoke at your alma mater, St. Michael's College, I think it was in 2017. Graduation, where you talked about leaders of consequence. Would you explain what you meant by that?
Sure. You know, what I encouraged the students at St. Michael's to do was really to do two things. One was to commit to be a part of something greater than themselves and to make a difference in that way. And then to have the courage of your convictions, to have moral courage in that context. And And so I used a couple of examples in my remarks, but the real point I was trying to make is that, what leadership is about something other than yourself. It's about actually serving others and putting your own needs aside and prioritizing the needs of those people that you may be fortunate enough to lead in life. And I think that, from my perspective, I wanted to talk to them about that because, number one, I think our country needs leaders, unselfish leaders, but the other is I think that's an incredibly rewarding way to spend your life, and I wanted to encourage them to do that.
At St. Michael's, were you in the ROTC?
I was not, Paul. I was in the platoon leaders class. So the Marine Corps has a slightly different program. So I did go to officer candidate school while I was at St. Michael's, but was not participating in, they didn't have naval ROTC at St. Michael's.
Right. I know St. Michael's. My longtime assistant attended St. Michael's along with her husband. Great place to go to school, I understand.
I really stumbled upon it my senior year in high school. I'd like to tell you there was some deliberate decision. But I had a great 4 years there, and I have no regrets.
You've spoken with respect to leadership about positive influence, a positive persuasion. Tell us what that means.
Sure. I'm inspired, as many Marines are, by the words of the 13th Commandant of the Marine Corps, General John A. Lejeune. And something that stuck with me since the first time I heard it as a new lieutenant was that the role of a leader is much like a teacher to a scholar, or a parent to a child. And the nature of that relationship is one where you encourage them to exceed, and sometimes you pick them up and you dust them off when they fail and get them back in the fight. And what I have found as I've looked at leaders through my career is those that are most effective, one, get buy-in on the mission of the organization. People in the organization know they are generally a part of the team, that the leadership actually cares about them, and most importantly, creates an environment where there's trust. People trust the training that they've had, they trust the man or woman on the left and right, and they trust their leadership, and that's the formula for success. And so, in my view, without talking about the negative side, it's about more than telling people what to do. It's about more than being an authoritarian that says, I'm in charge, so this is what you got to do. My assessment is that if you tell people not only what they're going to do, but why they are going to do it, and you leave it to them to the max extent possible to figure out how to do it, you're going to have people that are going to come together in a very cohesive team.
Can you talk about a challenge you had during your career that was difficult and how you overcame it?
I could think about many, right? So to narrow it down to one would be difficult. But I think one that all leaders face from time to time is affecting change. And so as I look back, certainly in the last part of my career, one of the most difficult challenges we had was to make the transition from almost a singular focus for more than a decade on dealing with violent extremism in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere, to transitioning to what we now call great power competition, where the benchmark for our capability development and our focus is on countries like China and Russia, and to a lesser extent Iran and North Korea. And I think when you go through an experience like that, you're actually not only changing the orientation of a very large distributed organization, but at the end of the day, you're changing culture as well. And so for me, as a senior leader, particularly, affecting change would be the most difficult. And I learned some things in that experience, but I actually like to say I relearned them. Seldom after the first few years I was in the Marine Corps did I learn anything. Most typically, I relearned a lesson that I had forgotten.
That seems to be the story of many lives, doesn't it? If you were to talk to young people today about education and what things they should be focused on, what would you say to them?
Yeah, today, when I think back to my time as a junior leader in the 1970s, people that were around in World War II in our profession would have been pretty comfortable with what we were doing in the 1970s. The pace of change was measured over decades. And I think, as we all know now, the pace of change is today measured in a matter of months. And so the most important thing, I think, for people to derive from education is not so much what to think, but how to think, and learn how to critically think, and learn how to identify what are the key elements of very complex problems. And I think that, you know, while we always say history doesn't repeat itself, we quickly say, but it does rhyme. And I think that education, not only well-founded in the sciences, but well-founded in history, can prepare somebody to deal with the challenges ahead. They're not going to be the same as the challenges that came before. And they're certainly going to come, you know, as I like to say, you're facing a high, hard one every day in the 21st century. Yeah. And I just think that a leader really brings a combination of education to kind of, you know, how to think, training, the competence, what they need to know, and then the experience, the numbers of sets and reps that they've had over their lives. And so all three elements of that are important in the development of a leader.
You know, I'm going to change the subject slightly, but I want to ask you about your physical fitness. I know you're involved in the Marine training program annually, even today. Tell me about that.
Look, I focus on physical fitness. I think all Marines do, and one of the reasons that you do is that you need to set the example. And you know, Marines don't expect you when you're 65 years old to be the fastest Marine in the formation, but they expect you to be out there doing what you're telling them they ought to do. And so I think that's just part of setting the example. And to be honest with you, I think there's a great relationship between how effective you are mentally and what your endurance is to deal with the stresses and challenges of whatever assignment you happen to be in, and the level of physical fitness that you bring every day.
You look very fit. You look ready to go. Boston Marathon this year?
You know, Paul, I don't think this year. I did do it with my daughter in 2017. If she does it again, I'll lay the gauntlet down for her. If she does it again, I might come out of retirement. But it would take running with my daughter as motivation for me to go out there again.
Sounds great. Well, I want to thank you very much for spending time here in the Captain's Cabin of Constitution. Your career was outstanding. You've served our country with great honor, and on behalf of the museum, thanks ever so much.
Hey, thanks, Paul. And let me just close, too, by thanking the museum. I think that when I look at the mission of the museum and what you, the trustees, and our president and CEO do, perhaps now more than ever, looking back and being aware of our history is important. Being aware of how did we get to where we are today. Having an appreciation for the values for which we stand and what it's taken to protect those values over time. And so the reverse is true. I just want to thank you, the trustees, and the whole team at the museum for bringing history alive for the next generation of leaders, so there is some continuity in our country between one generation and the next.
Well, thank you ever so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul.
Wasn't that inspiring? General Dunford's career and insights are tremendous. He embodies the spirit of a citizen leader, just as museum founder Charles Francis Adams did. Both humble men with generous hearts and a desire to serve the community and the nation. I was excited to recognize General Dunford's service with the museum's highest honor, the Charles Francis Adams Award. General Dunford, it gives me great pleasure to give you the Charles Francis Adams Award, the highest award given by the USS Constitution Museum for your distinguished service to our nation. This is a book unlike any other on your shelf. It's made of live oak, the same oak that this ship is made of, and it really exemplifies your career, durability, steadfast commitment to service, resilience.
Hey, thanks. Thanks so much, Paul. It's really an honor. Thanks.
Thanks. And that was really special, to be able to sit with General Dunford in the captain's cabin and to present him with the Charles Francis Adams Award. Another great tradition, of course, is the Grog toast to the USS Constitution. And with us today is Westy Saltonstall, Chairman Emeritus of the museum, to provide the toast. Westy?
Thank you, Paul. Everybody charge your glasses at home and get ready. It was April 1831. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Mansion House Hotel. The speaker, Commodore William Bainbridge, 9th in command of the United States Constitution. He gave a toast. Let me toast the ship, Never has she failed us. Never has her crew failed in showing their allegiance and belief in the country they served or the honor they felt in belonging to that ship that sheltered them and on whose deck where many gave their lives. To have commanded the Constitution is a signal honor, to have been one of her complement, and no matter how humble a capacity, an equal one. Her name is inspiration. Not only do her deeds belong to our naval record, she herself is possessed of a brave personality. In light weather, storms, or hurricane, or amid the smoke of battle, she responded with alacrity and obedience and seemed ever eager to answer the will of her commander. May the citizens of this country, in gratitude, see that she, like her namesake and prototype, will never be forgotten. Her commanders in the future, as in the past, will see to it that her flag shall never be lowered. She was conceived in patriotism. Gloriously has she shown her valor. Let her depart in glory if the fates so decree, but let her not sink and decay into oblivion. The ship.
The ship.
Thank you, Esty. We have a special opportunity this evening to support the museum. If you click on the link in the chat bar, you can make a donation to help the museum, or you can visit our website at any time at usscm.org/donate. We know these are difficult times, and we know we face a challenging year ahead. But with your support, the USS Constitution Museum will sail ahead through these choppy seas. Just like our mini boats, we can weather the storms, we can sail forward, we can make new friends internationally. USS Constitution is an inspiration, a model of resilience, ingenuity, and teamwork. The USS Constitution Museum can spark excitement about maritime heritage and service. Our students need hope and inspiration at this time. We all do. We can inspire the next generation of students to be informed citizens and leaders. This is only possible with your help. So thank you for your support, and thank you for joining us this evening.